Well, all of this prompted my parents to send this out at Christmas in 1941, stating that they're grateful to be Americans and proud of the country and its institutions. We are privileged at this season of the year to extend our friends' very sincere wishes for a real American Christmas. So this is the order that told us that we had to leave our properties, our all of the things that we had, and pack up and go to a detention camp. And the meeting place was the Salvation Army in downtown Portland. And the date that we were supposed to be there, otherwise be put in prison, because you're exchanging one real prison for a different kind of prison, was May 5th, and that happened to be the day that I was born. So my mom was given 3 days to deliver me. I was actually born at the Villa House Hotel, and then the next morning taken to the Good Samaritan Hospital in Portland with my mom, where we stayed for 3 days before being sent to this area, which was the first detention area for Japanese Americans in Portland, the Columbia Livestock Exposition Center. And as you see in that picture, it looks like we're being herded like cattle, which is very much like it was. The stall that we had was about 10 by 10. They hastily put over plywood over the manure, and of course spring was coming, and the flies were still breeding underneath in the horse manure. And so every area throughout the pavilion had thousands and thousands of flies, leading to health problems, and people were turning sick, and they had dysentery, all kinds of other issues. It was not a pleasant place to be. We stayed there for 5 months in this livestock center. My dad happened to be in charge because he was president of the JACL at that time, and he was in charge working with white administration to oversee all of the events, and he would write these letters of freedom, he said, to the governor and to the mayor. Well, it was actually the governor and the mayor who helped get him out after 3 months. He couldn't get his family out, but he was able to attend Earlham College in Richmond, Indiana, under the pretext that he wanted to get an MD degree even after he had his optometry degree. Well, they allowed him to do that through the grace of the governor and the mayor. And finally, in September of '42, my brother and I were transferred by train to the deserts of eastern Idaho to enter the Minidoka incarceration camp with 9,000 others from Seattle and Portland. And the exterior looked like this. This was the welcome that you got. The guard tower up there, and of course the grounds being surrounded by armed guards and barbed wire, which was later electrified. So some of the constitutional rights that we lost, the right of habeas corpus, we were not able to be tried in any court. Nobody was. We had no right of petitioning that this was not the correct thing to do. And of course, there were some people who protested this, but most Japanese Americans went along with this order and didn't challenge. And also in Article 1, no bills of attainder or ex post facto laws, legal acts that inflict punishment without trial. So Executive Order 9066, along with another public law, made it a crime to violate curfew and not to comply with the evacuation order. This was an unconstitutional bill of attainder against Japanese Americans who were guilty without trial. Well, back to our life in Minidoka was not very pleasant, as it wasn't in the detention center. And this is the laundry room picture where women wash the laundry, and babies like me at that time, because the mothers couldn't hold the baby in a shower for fear of dropping them, being soapy. So we were washed in these tubs. And in the meantime, my dad was here at Earlham College, shown on the left, while we were in the camp, shown on the right. And that's my mom holding me as a baby, and my brother in his tricycle, and my dad's mom next to my mom and me, and his sister Alice on the far left. Well, while he was at Earlham, You may wonder why I ended up with the name Wesley instead of Wesley. He changed the family name legally, and this is the document by which he did that. There were many reasons. The reason that he always gave was that being a practical businessman and an optometrist, his patients could never pronounce his name, spell it, or find it in the yellow pages, which is, of course, we don't have yellow pages anymore, but at that time, that was his reason. But, you know, realistically, given the prejudice and the feelings of the time, it was a cover. And I think very clearly that it was an advantage socially for him to have a different name that people could understand easily. Well, this is just a map of Minidoka, and the arrow points to where my mom, my brother, and I were in this barrack. And our block number was 31, and our room number was 5A. I just wanted to point out that where we were and where her mom, who would normally be there to support her in raising us, was where the star is on the upper left, and that was like 3 miles away. So she couldn't easily visit back and forth, just the insanity of where they put people. So another constitutional right that we lost, and the one that I wanted to point out, was involuntary servitude under Article 13, because the Japanese Americans worked for very low wages and were actually asked in many cases in California to go to back to the farm that they lost, that they had to sell rapidly, to pick the fruits for harvest, because at the time, the fruits were all ready to pick, and if they didn't have the labor to do it, they would just sit there and rot in the fields. This is just a picture of a mother and child walking in Minidoka, and the just extreme horrible conditions of the environment, because it was a desert, and during the summer, the temperatures would go up to 120. If it rained, all those fields became mud, and people get stuck in them trying to walk from one place to another. In the winters, temperatures would go down to -20, and it was a brutal condition, and barracks had no insulation. You got one stovepipe stove per barrack. And so we survived that for almost 2 years. That's a picture of me and my mom on the left, and my big brother on the right, playing ball. So my mom wrote a letter to the Western Regional Authority, the supervisor, Elmer Sherrill, who was based in Chicago, requesting permission to leave the camp so that she could join my dad and raise the family together in Chicago. In order to do that, you had to prove that you had an employable skill. And so in the letter, she details what she could do, and they decided, well, yeah, you could possibly get a job, so they finally allowed us to leave in January of 1944, before the end of the war. So we started again in Chicago. My dad was able to leave Earlham. He set up a practice again, and our first place, we're shown here on the steps of an apartment building in Douglas Park, which was at that time a very Jewish area. A beautiful synagogue was very close by. And that was one nice thing. The Jewish people were very welcoming to the Japanese Americans at that time. And there was less discrimination in general in Chicago than other places, and certainly not on the West Coast. My dad taught optometry at Monroe College, and Monroe College became the Illinois College of Optometry. He also worked at Northwestern in the Department of Ophthalmology, and at the same time he started his own practice and business, because he started researching contact lenses, which is what he eventually got into. He had an eye disease called keratoconus, which was the warping of the front of the eye. And to solve his own problems, he began to realize that contact lenses could actually replace that front surface, that warped surface of his eye, and give him perfect vision. Well, the problem was the lenses at that time were huge. And so he worked out the method to help create smaller plastic lenses that were usable. And he created the industry, which became the nation's largest contact lens manufacturer in the United States during the 50s and 60s. So you never know what an immigrant can do, is one of the points. So there were dissenters who objected to the treatment of the Japanese Americans at the time, and Gordon Hayabashi, Fred Korematsu, and Min Yasui were three of them. And they all had Supreme Court cases, which Professor Dane will probably discuss a little bit about. And they protested the constitutionality of exclusion, incarceration, and curfew. They all lost their cases. However, the Coram Nobis cases was able to correct these legal errors. And the cases were overturned, but, and meaning that the verdicts were vacated, but the decisions still remain, and so they can be still utilized. So just to go back to this poster of removal, and it's just, we changed it to say, instead of as a warning, but as a warning to all of us that if you believe in civil rights, we have to remain vigilant and to speak out against injustices, and that's never been more true than today. So that's it. Thank you very much.